Yes, you and I are going to drive an AMG today, yet first we need to qualify a rather bold claim. The most powerful four-cylinder engine on offer in a serial production car. I don't know about you, but what the hell does that mean? Is it just the output? 382 horsepower and 354 pound-feet of torque. Entirely respectable, especially when you consider that's almost 400 horsepower coming out of 2 liters, 4 cylinders, that's meant for front-wheel drive architecture. So really, it's probably more how do you arrive at those numbers? Well, first is the turbocharger. It's water-cooled, oil-cooled, and air-cooled. But what's interesting is how do you get the air to the turbocharger? Well, normally I pull these black plastic covers off the engine so I can show you the naked engines. Can't do that here because this is sort of like a Ram air cooler for the turbocharger, in that it connects the air coming through the grill to the turbocharger to further cool the turbocharger. And then while we're on the turbocharger, the shaft that the turbine and compressor wheels are connected to, that now has roller bearings. Now, I don't want to sound like Fletch here, but it's all roller bearings these days, especially when you consider that has been pilfered from the more expensive 4-liter twin-turbo V8s that we see in other AMGs. Now, it would stand to reason you can't get that kind of output out of such a small package without fooling with the boost pressure, and you can't do that without fooling with the fuel injection system. So what was just one direct fuel injection system is now a 2-stage fuel injection system, and it's that second stage that enables this to hit 382 horsepower. But again, you can't add all this air and all this fuel and expect the block to be the same tolerances and not blow up. So what they've done is they've changed the cylinder liners, and they've come up with these fancy names. They've added a lot of patents. But in essence, what it is a cylinder liner that's got like a mirror-like finish to reduce the friction inside the engine. Now, those are the high-tech changes. There's kind of a low-tech change in that they've taken the engine and they've turned it around 180 degrees, so now it's mounted with a turbocharger back here as opposed to here. And the reason why they did that is to shorten the amount of distance the air coming from the front of the car has to go to get to the intake to the engine. And that leads us to one last tech item, arguably the oldest tech in this entire engine. It is hand-built, in this case by Badge Rush Izufi. My apologies, sir, if I'm butchering your name. Okay, now that we understand how one arrives at such a bold claim, how does it translate to you and I? Well, VMAX 155 miles an hour. If this had the AMG driver's package, 168 miles an hour, 0 to 60 in 4 seconds. Which leaves us with the most important question of all. What carrying case does all this tech go into? The answer would be the 2020 Mercedes AMG CLA45. Now, in order to really understand all that, there's 2 party tricks here. Let's go to the first one, Sport Plus. We're going to forget about Sport and Comfort and get into it. And there is some good acceleration here. You notice there's a little bit of a delay in the Sport mode, but you do immediately know, wow, this is not your run-of-the-mill A220. Let's press on to the next party trick, which is race mode. And this is where we get much farther away from the architecture of an A Class, and the delay in acceleration kind of goes away, and this thing sounds glorious. Just listen to that. There's a little controlled misfire there. I wouldn't call the delivery of power here linear. I would call it explosive in race mode. Yes, the underpinnings come from the A-Class on which this is based, yet there are a laundry list of revisions. Let's go through those now, starting with the steering. The rack itself is mounted to the front subframe differently, and the logic being it's mounted in a more rigid way. Then the wheels, 19 inches all the way around. There are 2 different wheel styles on offer. Then the brakes, 13.8-inch diameter rotors in the front, 13-inch diameter rotors in the rear, vented all the way around. Then there's the suspension itself. McPherson strut in the front and 4-link in the back. That's like a carbon copy of the A-Class. But what changes is how the struts are mounted. They're diagonally mounted here. Then in the front, the bottom of that McPherson strut assembly, that wishbone, it's made of lighter weight aluminum, which makes that casting lighter, stronger, and bigger. And then last but not least, a dual clutch transmission, 8-speed, that's been reprogrammed for the more powerful engine. And one of the biggest things you noticed almost immediately is a difference in the steering. I don't want to say there's a lightness, but there is less reliance on the front wheels that's being communicated to you, the driver. Something I did not expect in an AMG vehicle that is based on an A Class. This is a noticeable difference. Now, I will say, it's still too light for an AMG vehicle. I would like some extra weight, and not from torque steer. That's really the only complaint I would lodge here. Other than that, man, wow, this is a surprisingly good change. An A220 has 221 horsepower. A CLA 250, not much more than that. So when you add almost double the amount of horsepower to the same structure of a carrying case, that could present a bit of a challenge. In the solution, very similar to what we saw in the BMW X5M competition, additional bracing. In the front, they had a brace connecting each shock tower. And then from each shock tower, they have a brace going to each A-pillar. Then underneath the engine compartment, there's a lightweight aluminum shearing panel sandwiching all this structure. Then moving to the rear, they accomplished the same thing by adding these, the best way to describe them are aluminum triangles that are mounted from the front of the rear subframe and then extend almost all the way to the rear suspension. There is significant control over pitch, squat, dive, and roll. One of the better front-wheel drive-based vehicles, to the point where it does impact ride quality. But if you're buying an AMG, I really don't think ride quality is on the top of your list of considerations. Admittedly, you and I have geeked out a bit too much on the tech throughout this episode, so let's downshift into design, and by far the most successful update is pilfering the nose from the AMG GT. However, that's not the only aspect that transforms the look of this thing and makes it unlike any other A-Class on the planet. There's a couple of other moving parts. First and foremost, Santa Maria Madre de Dios, Mountain Gray Magno, which is optional. That works in conjunction with another option, the aerodynamic package, which changes the air dam. It adds the flicks on the side of the bumpers, raises the height of the rear spoiler, changes the diffuser in the back, and that already works in conjunction with an ass end that's been pilfered from the larger and more beautiful CLS. Now, not entirely germane to this discussion, this is not the only time we're going to see this kind of nosectomy. The upcoming E-Class revision, specifically the E63S sedan and wagon, will have this kind of nose. So I'm going to turn this around to you. Is it a good thing to pilfer the nose from the AMG GT, or should those cars have their own personality or own schnoz in the front? Let me know in the comments below. First and foremost, one of the big things you noticed inside, they have taken a lot of the DNA in terms of design and touch points from fancier AMGs and made them standard here, like the switchgear on the steering wheel or some of the stuff down here. That is an incredibly nice touch. I still would like real gauges. It's an AMG product, man. I don't care how fancy the digital gauges get. As we see here, I'm in super sport mode. It's something only on the CLA45, but it just takes away from the specialness of the vehicle. And then a note while we're talking about gauges and screens. Apple CarPlay fitted as standard here. Okay integration, not the best I've seen, because it only takes up like this little bit here in the middle of the screen. It doesn't go completely widescreen 16:9 like BMW does, and even Mercedes did this when the E-Class came out, what, in 17. So can we fix that? That would be a very nice touch. And then pressing on to the most important note, the seats. They are magnificent. We've experienced them in other AMG products. Good to see them in, I guess we would call this a less expensive AMG product. The only thing I would change here is how to control them. Not this over here, the macro adjustments, it's the micro adjustments, like the pneumatic stuff, the lumbar, the side bolsters. That's all buried in the menu here. This is a pet peeve of mine in many other cars where they bury high use items in the menu. Let's not do that. Thus far, I have not shared with you that almost 400 horsepower coming out of that engine is not going through the front two wheels, it's going through all four wheels. If you are a Mercedes-Benz fanboy, you are very familiar with 4MATIC. They call this 4MATIC Plus. I would call this more 4MATIC Lite, because it's not like an E63S where you can lop off the torque from going to the front wheels, but you can make some changes here, so follow me on this one. What they've done is they've kind of pilfered the system from the CLA250 we recently drove, where there is an electromechanical clutch between the front and the rear of the car. That's a difference from the previous generation of these cars that had an electro-hydraulic clutch. Now in a CLA250 or an A220, it could send up to 50% of the torque to the rear wheels. This one, they don't exactly tell you how much torque is going to the rear wheels. However, they do tell you there's not one of those electromechanical clutches, there's two of them. So it can separate the torque from front to rear as well as side to side in the rear. And the reason why they do this is all those drive modes. So there's comfort, there's individual, there's sport, sport plus, and race mode. The one you and I are most interested in is race mode, because if you hit that, and then press the ESP off button and then fool with the steering wheel paddles, you can get it into what AMG calls a drift mode. Now the Captain Obvious question here, does that send 100% of the torque to the rear wheels? In speaking with AMG, they wouldn't say. Oh my God, it does make it sound much more obnoxious. This is not your friendly Mercedes to drive around fancy neighborhoods like this. But you do immediately notice a difference in the weight of the steering. Not so much steering in terms of going around corners. You notice there's less torque going to the front wheels in the car. Is it so different to the point where you're going to forget an E Class or an E63? Probably not. It is a pisser to drive. Yes, it is indeed that time again to play your favorite game of mine, the options game, with today's contestant, 2020 Mercedes AMG CLA45 4MATIC Plus for a suggested retail price of $54,800. To that, we add a stunning shade of mountain gray Magno for $2,500. Put another way, that is almost 5% of this vehicle's base price just in paint. Then, if you're going to make the outside look pretty, you might as well make the interior look pretty. Black and red leather seats, $1,450. Brushed aluminum trim on the dash, at least that's no charge. And then, if you're going to make the interior and exterior look pretty, you might as well have better wheels. Well, for the avoidance of doubt, 19-inch wheels are fitted as standard. However, if you want your 19-inch wheels to be matte black and twin 5 spokes, that's an additional $500. Then there's a garage door opener. That is optional on a $55,000 vehicle, $280. Then remember when we talked about the 155 mile an hour VMAX and you could raise it? Well, you got to pay money for that, $1,400. Heated and ventilated front seats, definitely worth it, $450. Sirius XM radio is optional on a $55,000 car, $460. Can we fix this? The Burmester surround sound, very much worth it. And this one's kind of a bargain. It's only $850. Usually this is like $4,000 in a Mercedes or a Porsche. Then the inductive wireless charging and NFC pairing. Again, optional, $200, but I will give them that there is this very cool like handle that comes out and holds your phone down. Can we make that free? And then we move on to a rather curious option with an odd name called Special Order. I'm almost afraid to ask what this is, but my guess is if you want the fancy paint with the fancy wheels and the higher speed limit, they charge you a processing fee of $250 and call it Special Order. To that we add rear side airbags, $420. Then we get into packages. The first one is the driver's assistance package, very important on Mercedes because it adds all the safety doodads like the Distronic Plus, the lane keep assist, that is $1,700. The parking assistance package, this is the parking assist as well as the surround view cameras, $1,090. The exterior lighting package, this It changes how the lights go on and off at night, and they look incredibly cool, as well as the adaptive high beam, $900. The multimedia package, this is really two things. Number one, it's the augmented navigation system, which answers the question, why would you pay extra for navigation from a car manufacturer when you have an iPhone or Android? This is the answer. And then it changes the screens. Without this package, the screens on this thing, they're like this big. But with this package, it looks like one big screen. In reality, it's two very large screens for $1,150. Then the AMG Night package. This adds all the black trim as well as some other bits to make it look a little bit more sporty, $750. The AMG Aerodynamic package, which we talked about, $1,250. And then we move on to two of the most important options on offer here. The AMG Performance Seat Package Advanced, translated Recaro seats, $3,390, well worth it. And then the rebuilt AMG Dynamic Plus package. Remember we talked about that drift mode? That's how you get a drift mode. You have to pay an extra $2,900, and that changes the AMG drive unit. So basically, this is a tune to your car from the factory. Last but not least, destination and delivery, $995 for a total retail price of, built in, $77,685. Now, normally we press on to other stuff in episodes after the options game, but here we need to end it because this is the most important part of this vehicle. At $55,000 US, it is a hell of a car. That kind of power with this kind of handling, I would argue you do need that tuning package. You probably need the Recaro seats. I'd love the paint, but then you're getting back into the 60s. And this is why it's a problem. At $80,000, which this thing almost is, you're competing with a used E63. You're competing with a new C63. We're talking vehicles that are rear-wheel drive that have a 4-liter twin-turbo V8. Put another way, this is all how you configure your car, which is very closely related to how you pick your residential real estate. You never buy the house, you always buy the block, because you don't want to be the fancy house in the cheap seats, you want to be the cheap seats in the fancy neighborhood. Okay, perhaps it's a pet peeve, perhaps it's just me, but this is an AMG product. Can we have the shifter moved here? I don't need extra cup holders. I need a proper weighted shifter that is in the console, that is made preferably of like aluminum. It's got leather on it so you don't burn your hand. Can we do that? That'd be great.